The day of the trial finally arrived, and Rohan was nowhere to be found. Leela, the NGO leader, waited and waited, no sign of him. Her eyes shining with determination suddenly turned despair. Alas, Rohan had joined the list of lawyers that disappointed her on the D-Day. What more could she have expected from a nameless lawyer who just graduated from law school?
Rohan LLB.
The sweltering Mumbai heat enveloped Rohan like a suffocating blanket as he stepped out of the worn, wooden doors of the Mumbai University's law faculty. The year was 2014, and Rohan had just graduated with a law degree, his heart swelling with pride and his mind racing with the endless possibilities that lay ahead. As he walked through the crowded streets, the cacophony of car horns, chatter, and wailing sirens was a familiar symphony to Rohan's ears. Born and raised in the humble, working-class neighborhood of Chembur, Rohan had grown accustomed to the harsh realities of life. His father, a retired factory worker, had always instilled in him the importance of education and the pursuit of justice. Rohan's thoughts drifted to his first case, a pro bono assignment from a local NGO that advocated for the rights of marginalized farmers in rural Maharashtra. Leela's eyes had burned with a fierce intensity as she recounted the tale of the farmer's struggles against the wealthy businessman Vikram. His company, Vikram Industries, had been accused of forcibly acquiring land from the farmers, using strong-arm tactics and bribes to silence any opposition. Nobody would take the case of Leela, since it was a pro bono one. The farmers were being forced off their land by a wealthy businessman, Vikram, who wants to build a new factory. All the top lawyers who attempted to take the case got all paid off before the case could even start, and they ended up turning Leela down. This would be the opportunity Rohan had been looking for all his life. It was some sort of win-win case for him. Even if he lost the case in the end, the media would have freely carried his name, and he would be known as the lawyer who went toe-to-toe with Vikram, one of India's wealthiest, most corrupt, and most feared man, and should he win, his young career would definitely have a big boost. The NGO's leader, Leela, a fiery and determined woman in her mid-40s, had approached Rohan with a plea for help. Leela heard about Rohan from one of his colleagues, a friend of hers, and decided to visit him. Rohan's gut had twisted with anger and a sense of injustice as he listened to Leela's words. He knew he had to take on the case, no matter the risks or challenges that lay ahead. "I'm in, Leela," Rohan had said, his voice firm and resolute. "Let's take on Vikram and fight for the rights of these farmers." Leela's face had lit up with a warm smile, and she had grasped Rohan's hands in a tight, fervent handshake. "Thank you, Rohan," she had said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Together, we can make a difference." As Rohan walked through the crowded streets, he felt a sense of purpose and direction that he had never felt before. He knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, but he was ready to face whatever challenges came his way.
The journey begins.
The next morning, Rohan set off on the long journey to the rural village of Khed, where the farmers were waiting for him. The dusty, winding roads stretched out before him like a serpent, promising a journey of discovery and danger. As he traveled, Rohan's thoughts turned to the case ahead. He knew that he would have to gather evidence, interview witnesses, and build a strong case against Vikram Industries. The stakes were high, and Rohan was determined to succeed. After several hours of travel, Rohan finally arrived in Khed, a small, rural village nestled in the heart of Maharashtra. The village was surrounded by rolling hills and vast expanses of agricultural land, which stretched out as far as the eye could see. As Rohan stepped out of the car, he was greeted by Leela and a group of farmers, who welcomed him with warm smiles and open arms. "Namaste, Rohan," Leela said, her eyes shining with warmth. "We're glad you're here. The farmers are eager to share their stories with you." Rohan nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. He knew that he was about to embark on a journey that would change his life forever. "Let's get started," he said, his voice firm and resolute. And with that, Rohan's journey began, a journey that would take him to the very heart of India's rural landscape, where the struggles of the marginalized and the powerful would collide in a battle for justice.
The farmers' stories.
Over the next few days, Rohan listened to the stories of the farmers, each one a testament to the struggles and hardships faced by the rural poor. The farmers spoke of their land, their livelihoods, and their families, all of which were under threat from Vikram Industries. One farmer, a grizzled old man named Ramesh, spoke of how Vikram's men had come to his village, offering him a pittance for his land. "They said I had no choice," Ramesh said, his eyes flashing with anger. "They said that if I didn't sell, they would take my land anyway." Rohan's gut twisted with rage as he listened to Ramesh's story. He knew that he had to act, to do something to help these farmers and bring Vikram Industries to justice. As he gathered evidence and interviewed witnesses, Rohan began to build a strong case against Vikram Industries. But he knew that the company would stop at nothing to silence him and the farmers.
The threats begin.
One night, as Rohan sat in his small hotel room in Khed, poring over documents and preparing for the case ahead, he received a chilling phone call. "Rohan, you're making a big mistake," a menacing voice growled on the other end of the line. Drop the case against Vikram Industries, or you'll face the consequences. Rohan's heart racing, he tried to remain calm and composed. "Who is this?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. The voice laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "You don't need to know who I am," it said. "Just remember, you've been warned." The line went dead, and Rohan was left sitting in the darkness, his mind reeling with fear and uncertainty. He knew that he couldn't back down now. He had to see the case through, no matter what the cost. But as he lay in bed that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained on him, waiting for him to make his next move.
The evidence mounts.
Over the next few weeks, Rohan continued to gather evidence and build his case against Vikram Industries. He traveled to different villages, interviewing farmers and gathering testimony. He also discovered that Vikram Industries had a history of using strong-arm tactics to silence its opponents. There were reports of intimidation, bribery, and even violence. Rohan knew that he had to be careful, that he was taking on a powerful and ruthless opponent. But he was determined to see justice served. As he prepared for the trial, Rohan felt a sense of pride and purpose. Pride and purpose. He knew that he was fighting for something bigger than himself, something that would make a difference in the lives of countless people. The night before the trial, Vikram's men ambushed him and shot him as they drew closer to confirm the kill. Rohan's community came out en masse with weapons, so Vikram's men withdrew. They took him to the hospital that night.
The trial begins.
The day of the trial finally arrived, and Rohan was nowhere to be found. Leela, the NGO leader, waited and waited, no sign of him. Her eyes shining with determination suddenly turned despair. Alas, Rohan had joined the list of lawyers that disappointed her on the D-Day. What more could she have expected from a nameless lawyer who just graduated from law school? The judge, a stern-looking woman with a reputation for being tough but fair, looked at Leela. "This court is now in session," she said. "Let the trial begin." Vikram's lawyer was already present, along with his client, Mr. Vikram. The judge waited for Rohan, but he didn't show up. And just as she was about to bang the gavel and seal the case in favor of Mr. Vikram, a badly wounded, bandaged Rohan dragged himself into the court looking rough and visibly bleeding from the bandage. Everybody stood up. Some cheered him up. Some couldn't help but cry. Others helped him. Amidst all the chaos, Leela was the happiest woman in the world at that time. She could feel their win within their grasp. Rohan stood before the court, with the pain in his voice ringing out as he presented the prosecution's case. He called witness after witness, each one testifying to the wrongdoing of Vikram Industries. The farmers spoke of their land being taken, of their livelihoods being destroyed. Rohan also presented documents and records showing how Vikram Industries had used bribery and intimidation to silence its opponents. The judge listened intently, her expression growing increasingly stern. Vikram's lawyer, a smooth-talking man named Mr. Jain, tried to poke holes in Rohan's case, but Rohan was prepared. He had anticipated every question, every objection. As the day drew to a close, Rohan felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had presented a strong case, and he knew that he had made a difference. But as he left the courtroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. Vikram Industries would stop at nothing to win, and Rohan knew that he had to be prepared for anything. The court had to assign a protective detail to keep him safe at all times till the case ended.
The defense's case.
The next day, Vikram's lawyer, Mr. Jain, presented the defense's case. He called witnesses who testified that Vikram Industries had done nothing wrong, that the farmers had willingly sold their land. But Rohan was not convinced. He knew that the witnesses were lying, that they had been bribed or intimidated into testifying. He cross-examined the witnesses, trying to trip them up, to expose their lies. But Mr. Jain was a skilled lawyer, and he did his best to protect his witnesses. As the day drew to a close, Rohan felt a sense of frustration. He knew that he had to do something to turn the case around. He spent the night poring over documents, looking for any weakness in the defense's case. And then, just as he was about to give up, he found it. A small discrepancy in the records, a tiny crack in the defense's armor. Rohan knew that he had to exploit it, to use it to his advantage. He went to bed that night, his mind racing with excitement. He knew that he had a winning blow.
The turning point.
The next morning, Rohan stood before the court, his eyes locked on the judge. "Your Honor, I request permission to present new evidence," he said, his voice firm and confident. The judge raised an eyebrow. "What is the nature of this new evidence, Mr. Rohan?" she asked. Rohan smiled, a small, triumphant smile. "It's a discrepancy in the records, Your Honor. A discrepancy that proves Vikram Industries was involved in bribery and intimidation." The judge's expression changed, her eyes narrowing. "Very well, Mr. Rohan. Present your evidence." Rohan nodded, his heart racing with excitement. He presented the evidence, a series of documents and records that showed Vikram Industries had paid bribes to government officials and intimidated farmers into selling their land. The courtroom erupted into chaos, Vikram's lawyer objecting loudly, but Rohan stood firm, his voice ringing out above the din. "This is the proof we need, Your Honor," he said. "Proof that Vikram Industries is guilty of wrongdoing." The judge banged her gavel, calling the court to order. "The defense will have a chance to respond to these allegations," she said. "But for now, I find the prosecution's evidence compelling. The trial will continue." Rohan felt a surge of triumph, a sense of vindication. He knew that he had turned the tide of the trial, that he had finally found the evidence he needed to prove Vikram Industries' guilt.
The verdict.
The trial continued for several more days, the defense presenting its case and the prosecution responding. But Rohan knew that the outcome was no longer in doubt. He had presented too much evidence, too many witnesses had testified against Vikram Industries. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. Rohan stood before the court, his heart pounding with anticipation. The judge looked down at him, her expression serious. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, I find Vikram Industries guilty of bribery, intimidation, and land grabbing, she said. The courtroom erupted into cheers, the farmers and their families weeping with joy. Rohan felt a sense of pride and satisfaction, knowing that he had fought for justice and won. Vikram Industries was fined heavily, and its CEO, Vikram, was sentenced to prison. The farmers were awarded compensation for their land, and their livelihoods were restored. Rohan had won the case, but he knew that the real victory was not his own. It was the victory of the farmers, who had fought for their rights and their land. It was the victory of justice, which had been served. As Rohan walked out of the courtroom, he felt a sense of pride and purpose. He knew that he had made a difference, that he had fought for what was right.
Epilogue.
Rohan's victory in the case against Vikram Industries made headlines across the country. He became a hero to many, a symbol of hope and justice. But Rohan knew that he was not a hero. He was just a lawyer, doing his job to the best of his ability. He continued to work on cases, fighting for justice and human rights, and he continued to inspire others, to motivate them to make a difference in the world. Years later, Rohan would look back on the case against Vikram Industries as a turning point in his career. It was the case that had made him a lawyer, that had given him the courage and the conviction to fight for what was right. And it was the case that had changed him, that had made him a better person and a better lawyer. Rohan's journey had been long and difficult, but it had been worth it. He had found his purpose, his passion, and his place in the world. And he had found justice.
Rohan LLB will return.